Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. And in this video, we are going to discuss velocity in Agile. So I was in class 8th, my physics teacher entered the class and asked all students to write the definition of velocity. Of course, I didn't know the definition. She moved towards me and explained the concept of velocity in the simplest way she could. She said, velocity is the displacement of an object per unit time. And years later, when I joined the software development industry, I heard the same term again. But this time, I knew the answer because the definition of velocity in Agile is very similar to the former one. In Agile, velocity is the progress of an Agile team per sprint. Isn't it simple and interesting? Just imagine you are a client of a software development company. And the company is building a product for your organization. What will be the one obvious question in your mind? How soon can an Agile team ship a usable software or functionality to market? Isn't it? And here, the velocity comes into play. Velocity allows the Agile team to estimate the time required to deliver a usable feature to the market. So in this way, we can define velocity in Agile. In Agile, velocity is the amount of work an Agile team can deliver in a predefined period of time. It is a key metric used to measure the rate at which development teams deliver business value. In simple words, it is a measure of the productivity of a team. Also, in Scrum, velocity is the measure of work completed by a team during a sprint. It is a distance the Scrum development team travels to reach the sprint goal. At the end of each sprint, velocity is calculated by adding up story points of all completed user stories. But the main question is, why do we need velocity in Agile? Velocity can help the Agile team in many ways. For example, by knowing velocity, Agile teams can avoid overpromising on deliveries. Also, it allows the development team to predict the project's timeline. Another thing is that velocity eases the process of sprint planning for the entire team. It helps the team to prepare a strategy for the project. Also, knowledge of velocity gives a team idea about when they can deliver the next usable increment of a product. The last point is that concept of velocity can be used to estimate a team's efficiency over a period of time. But how we can calculate sprint velocity in Agile? To calculate the sprint velocity, the team should have a track over completed user stories and their story points. At the end of each sprint, the team adds up story points of all done user stories. And this total is called sprint velocity in Agile. Let's have a look at some examples. So assume, during sprint 1, the team is committed to 5 user stories. And story point of each user story is 2. Now let's say that number of done user stories in sprint 1 is 3. Then total story point completed in sprint 01 would be 6. Now let's move to sprint 2. Assume that in sprint 2 the team is committed to 7 user stories. And story point of each user story 2. Also, the number of done user stories in this sprint is 4. Then total of 8 story points will complete in sprint 2. Jumping to sprint 3. The number of user stories the team is committed to in sprint 3 is 6. And the story point of each user story is 2. And if the number of done user stories is 5. Then total story point completed in sprint 3 is 10. Now, the average velocity of a sprint can be easily calculated by knowing the team's past 3 sprints velocity. In our example, the velocities of 3 sprints were 6, 8, and 10. So average sprint velocity will be 8 story points. Inputs required to calculate the accurate velocity of any team are model stories to estimate new user stories, estimated user stories, and backlog items successfully delivered in previous iterations. Now that you know how to calculate the development team's average velocity, let's move to the Agile velocity chart. An Agile velocity chart is a graphical representation of a project's progress. It helps the team to keep track of the project. The graph's y-axis represents story points, whereas x-axis depicts the sprints completed by the team. So here are the few things you need to keep in mind if your team just started dealing with velocity. First, create a set of model stories with story points which the team can refer to while estimating new user stories. Second, the average of the last few sprint velocities should be used for upcoming sprint planning. Third, maximum velocity does not always imply maximum productivity. Fourth, it takes a few sprints before the Agile team can estimate a stable velocity. Fifth, don't compare different teams' velocities as other teams use different estimation techniques. The sixth and last point is that story points of partially completed user stories should not be considered while determining sprint velocity. On this note, we have reached the last section of the video, that means the conclusion part. Velocity in Agile is a tool to make estimations. It is the rate at which the Scrum team delivers usable increments of a feature after each sprint. But maximum velocity does not always imply maximum productivity of the team. Thus, maximizing velocity should never be your ultimate goal. That's it for today's video. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, drop your suggestions and feedback in the comments section. And we at Mentorites offer personalized mentoring to clear Scrum Master interviews and excel in Scrum Master roles. Link to Mentorites in the description. Get in touch with me through WhatsApp, LinkedIn, or email. Thank you. And I will see you in the next video.